Just a while ago, I was going through yoga and Tai Chi, and in the process, I focus on the activities, the body. Especially important is not so much about the movement, but the sense I have internally. Call it the inner body sensation. And then I came up with this mini awakening, which I have been practicing, but I think it's very important to talk. The title of this is Melting into the Universe. In the past, I mentioned about melting into the nature. And that is such a wonderful feeling that the ego is gone, the self is gone, and you are one with the nature. So this idea of melting into the universe is pretty much the same, but more in a little bit different dimension. Not so much about the sensation of being one, but the inner body sensation. What I mean is that when I move one movement to the other, like Tai Chi or yoga, I know the procedure that I developed over time, and I'm just empty within myself, non-thinking, but at the same time, focus more on inner body sensation. That's pure awareness, as I want to call it. And what does that mean, the pure awareness and inner body sensation? To me, that's the same as you are being one with the universe. And it's a funny expression, but let me try to explain. I think it's fairly important because that's why I call it the mini awakening. The point is that there is no center. As much as melting into nature is away from the busy mind work, doing this, doing that. In a yoga or Tai Chi, there are movement one after the other. If I'm not well prepared, I may just move on one after the other as if it's just a task and a job to do. So it becomes mechanical instead of being in the now, be aware of what's going on. So the point of the yoga or Tai Chi is much more than the form but the substance. And the substance is the inner body, emptiness, nothingness. And what do I mean by nothingness? Nothing means everything, in fact. That's the Zen saying, so to speak. In nothing, but if I can use my mind and the scientific way of explaining this, I can see and feel each cell in my body is the center of the universe. So there are billions of centers within myself. And what I'm after is those cells, each cells are connected to each other. And this may not make sense at all, but bear with me, I try to explain. Physiologically, let's say, all the cells are part of the organs, the lung and heart and the intestine, whatever. And they work together using the example of the heart. If you leave the heart alone, some experiment was made some time ago, I remember. All the cells, or if you have the heart cells put together some form, and then you put themselves kind of together, then start to develop the heartbeat. And that's the amazing part of the cells. To the point that each cell in the heart is basically functioning together as a group, each independent but working together, whatever the way the DNA may have put them to behave like. So that's already far-fetched idea that things happen like that. I can think of one other interesting example of the firefly. This is one of the islands in Asia I read somewhere. In the evening, each firefly have this frequency of the light coming out of his body. And the time moves on, and then later you see the lights start to synchronize. And then much later, the whole island, as I was told, was going boom, 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 like the synchronized light. It's hard to believe that, as in the case of the heart and the muscles and the cells working together, there's a synchronized process of how they feel comfortable to flow the energy as a group as opposed to each independent cells or the insect in this case, whatever the case is. So maybe it's already far-fetched and maybe nobody can follow well, but bear with me. So if you understand that, and if I connect to the Zen saying, because that's my background, there's a saying something of that nature of there's a circle, but there's no center. And I thought that's quite interesting, so it stayed with me. But one explanation, if I may make, is that there are so many centers, infinite number of centers inside, therefore there's no center, so to speak. So bridging those points that I mentioned, if you can bear with me, is that the whole cells in our body is working together. And I use that analogy when I was talking about the mini company and mini-me. And that's another discussion. But the idea is, instead of the centralized control what to do in my body, use the brain and the cells, but without doing anything, as you know, or you can imagine when you are born, there's no direction from the mind, because the mind was not developed at the time. But they are living, right? And gradually, because of DNA, they form the mind to understand the logic, meaning of the word, and relate to that and make living. That's how it happened. But at the origin, and even after we are born and having a mind, that structure or the construct of who we are is just the amazing process of decentralized control of all the cells and the organs working together like a customer and suppliers connected to each other, so they make sense out of the whole to live. In the meantime, mind has its own going with the words and the logic, yesterday, today, tomorrow, what to do. I have to prepare for the flight, and it's so many things to go through. And when I think too much, that kind of create a gap between what's in the mind and what's in the body. So maybe my body's hurting or the stomach is aching, but I may push it because the mind says you have to follow this regulation and process, otherwise you cannot fly out, pass through the immigration, all of that. So the mind has its own function to live as a human, but in the meantime, the body is functioning, following the law of nature, connected to each other. So that's the universe. Two universe I mentioned about the universe of the mind or the brain and the universe of the body, or the universe of nature. So the melting nature is to remind us that we are that nature ourselves. The mind doesn't think like that because they are busy about how to pass through the gate and get the flight, and the stomach may be hurting. But we are all connected. And to have a happy living, we have to be able to synthesize, integrate, connect to each other. And if we lose the balance, of course that's not healthy from the point of view of the nature, but from the point of the mind, we have to do what we have to do. So that creates the conflict. And If you have lots of conflict that is represented as a stress, and physiologically you're affected because of the adrenaline and hormone and the heartbeat and the pressure and whatever happens can be disturbed. So the life is such that all the information, bombarding, regulation, protocols, changes, more news on the internet. And we have this process, and I can imagine a human being developing huge brain so that you can handle it. But does it make sense? Well, you can see that the brain has been evolving to get bigger and bigger, so you may have a huge brain, or you may be substituted with the AI and the USB connected, and you bring that stuff with you, or through the internet, or the satellite, or the, what's the word, cloud computing. So we become the hybrid of the living being and the connection to the network of the satellite and the data center, as well as our brain. That's kind of far-fetched idea, but that's the direction we are going because of the stress and what can be done. Is that the progress? No wonder some people want to be melting into nature to have the sanity, but other people may be pushing forward with their scientific discovery to explore the future, to live longer. Maybe that's part of the DNA. But for me, this occasion of waking up and doing the exercise, I'm pointing out to myself and sharing in this platform that, okay, that might be the progress, but let's realize who we are, what's going on now, what's the right judgment to make, so that we can be sane and be happy and have time to talk or think or feel as I'm doing to myself. Because by now, not many people may be watching this. But to me, it doesn't matter. Because realization, mini awakening, whatever, is the way that I see me finding the destiny in my life. And if I lose that and become a part of the, what's the word, cog, or the pieces of the mechanics of the world, and then driven and get lost who we are, where we are from, and what's the center, and how we can be sane, the balance may be lost. I don't know if you follow my logic, but the point is to be happy given the situation we got. Given the situation, we have so much information from outside and threat and unknowns that if you put your mind into it, get so crazy. But you have to travel, you have to go through the immigration, airplane, and all of that. I was hesitating to travel, but for whatever reason, I don't want to go into it. There's a legal issue that I have to address to renew my green card. That's one. And the COVID situation, and have to make a judgment. So that gave me some moment of, you can call it the stress or the hurdle to pass through, to be able to find the way moving into the future. I'm pretty sure more people feel some level of stress or confused state of what we are going through. Watching the Ukraine situation, reminding me of my visit to Russia, thinking of what they may be doing now. I think I put another video on this subject. You know, the world is such a chaotic place if you look at that way. But like I have been sharing here on this platform, and also bring some materials together in the presentation and the ideas into the future, how to find the destiny in the world where we live. There's certain way that we can find the destiny to live a life. So for this occasion, I used my camera. Not so lazy. I just wanted to explain and share that I exist and I can use the camera, and wanted to say hi. And before my departure in the next few days to fly out, at the same time going through this preparation and get ready from moment to moment. And the one way of doing it, to know ourselves, to know what's going on, even to the cell level, and have that total clarity of who we are, not just the part of the brain and the mind and occupied and go through it, but there's other part of me and the universe functioning. I call it the nature's way versus the human way. We have to have the bridge in between and make sense out of it. And if we don't, and often we get to the position of having a conflict or miscommunication, we have to find the way to bridge the gap, make sense of it, and find the destiny, how we live, and find the principle way so that we make sense out of this chaos and have fun.